Hello and welcome to video 2 of the reading of Little Pear by Eleanor Frances Lattimore. In this video number 2, we'll be reading chapter 3 and chapter 4 of the book Little Pear. Chapter 3, How Little Pear Wanted Both a Top and a Tang-hulur. Hulur. I think those are both Chinese toys. Let's read and find out what a top and a Tang-hulur is. For some time after Little Pear's trip to the city, he was very good. Perhaps he was sorry to have frightened his family so. Anyway, he was very good, and one day his mother said, "Little Pear, here are some pennies. Run along and buy yourself a pretty toy." "Thank you," said Little Pear, reaching out in delight for the pennies. They had holes in the middle and were all strung on a string which was tied so they could not slip off. Little Pear started forth in great excitement and almost tripping over the high doorstep. As he hurried along the street, he counted his pennies. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 pennies. He couldn't remember ever having been so rich before. Oh, on each side of the street were walls made of sun-baked bricks. Over the top of the walls you could see the roofs of the houses. Some were made of gray tiles, and some were made of straw. In the walls were many gateways leading into the courtyards of the houses. They had different colored doors, red doors and black doors, and once in a while a green door dotted with gold paint. "Little Pear, Little Pear," called a voice suddenly. Little Pear turned around, and there was his friend Big Head, calling to him from his gateway. "Come and see my new top," he cried. "It is the most beautiful top in the whole world, and the fastest spinner." "Aye, aye," exclaimed Little Pear, and he looked at the top admiringly. Do you know what a top is that the friend Big Head is describing? A top is a small toy that you spin on the ground, and once you start it spinning, it will continue spinning by itself for a few minutes. It was certainly a beauty. A great pear-shaped silver top with stripes of scarlet, pink, and green. So it's silver with stripes of scarlet, which is red, and pink and green, and it spins on the ground. Big Head proudly spun it, and it twirled around and around while a crowd of children gathered to watch. Little Pear slipped away toward the street where the shops were, thinking, "Perhaps I could find a beautiful top like that. I have 4 pennies." Little Pear walked along the street, humming happily, and the very first shop that he came to sold tinware. There were little tin pots, tin teapots, and tin saucepans, and they hung in bunches in front of the open shop and rattled merrily in the breeze. Little Pear stopped and looked at the tinware. There's a picture of Big Head and his top that's spinning on the ground. And he thought that he would like a teapot of his own. But then he looked at his 4 pennies and thought of the top, and so he walked on. So there's his 4 pennies on the string. And he's thought about getting a teapot, then he remembered how much he wanted a top like Big Head. There's a caption here that says, "Hot chestnuts! Hot chestnuts!" That's this person, looks like a woman to me, is selling a food called chestnuts. Hot chestnuts! Hot chestnut nuts! called a man in a loud sing-song voice. So it's a man. Standing behind a tray of smoking hot chestnuts just off the charcoal. Little Pear wrinkled up his nose in joy as he sniffed the delicious smell. But he looked at his 4 pennies and thought of the toy shop at the end of the street, and he walked on. Tang-hulurs, Tang-hulurs, called a man coming toward him. And this time Little Pear stopped short with his mouth wide open. For the man was simply laden down with Tang-hulurs, which are Little Pear's favorite candy. So here are the Tang-hulurs, and that's not a toy like I predicted. It's a candy, so my prediction was not correct. And it's Little Pear's favorite candy. For the man was simply laden down with Tang-hulurs, which were Little Pear's favorite candy. He looked at the red fruit, 8 or 10 on a stick, all covered with candied syrup, and he jingled his string of pennies. He thought he would be perfectly happy if he could have a Tang-hulur. How much? He asked the man. 2 pennies a stick. Little Pear untied the string and gave the man 2 of his precious pennies. So there he is. He has his Tang-hulur candy, which are little fruit on a stick covered in syrup, and he still has, how many pennies are left on his string now? He paid 2 pennies to get his Tang-hulur, so how many pennies does he have left? The toy shop, let's see, then he started on toward the toy shop, nibbling at his Tang-hulur. The toy shop was very wonderful. There were wooden swords painted in pink and green and gold. There were funny little monkeys made of clay covered with chicken feathers. That does sound funny. Wonder if we can see that in the picture. I'm not sure what part of the picture that would be. And round boxes made of gourds, all delicately carved. The boxes were stained orange or green or brown, and they had crickets inside of them and made a queer little singing noise with their wings. There were cloth tigers with smiling faces and green glass eyes. And yes, there were tops. Tops of all colors, striped and plain. This one, said Little Pear to the shopman, pointing to one as large and beautiful as Big Head's. The tops, said the man, are 4 pennies. Oh dear, cried Little Pear. I bought a Tang-hulur with 2 of my pennies. There are not enough left. Come back some day when you have more money, said the shopman. But suddenly, Little Pear had a much better idea. He ran down the street until he met the Tang-hulur man again. Another Tang-hulur, please, he said, and handed the man his last 2 pennies in exchange for a delicious stick of candy. Now, what do you think that Little Pear's plan is? He started with 4 pennies. He already gave away 2 pennies to buy the candy, but he wants the top, and it costs 4 pennies. But now he's gone back and spent his other 2 pennies already. Now he has 0 pennies left. What do you think Little Pear is going to do now? What do you predict? Let's find out. Then, very happily, he spent all his money, but he didn't get the top. I wonder why he's happy. He trotted along till he came to the home of Big Head. Big Head was sitting on his doorstep alone, holding his top. He looked very much surprised when he saw Little Pear with 2 Tang-hulurs. One Tang-hulur was almost gone, but the other hadn't a single bite taken out of it. Oh, Little Pear, how good they must taste, said Big Head. I do love Tang-hulurs. So do I, replied Little Pear. But I will trade you my whole Tang-hulur that isn't eaten for your top. But Big Head would not do. He was a little older, and a little wiser than Little Pear. So he said, so what was Little Pear's plan? Little Pear's plan was to give Big Head the Tang-hulur and get Big Head to give him the top. But Big Head said no. Even though he wanted the candy, he wouldn't do it. So let's see what Big Head said. So he said, I cannot give you my precious top, but I will share it with you if you will share your Tang-hulur with me. So that is what they did. They took turns eating the Tang-hulur until it was gone. And they took turns spinning the top. And they were perfectly happy. Chapter 4. How Little Pear Lit a Firecracker. Oh no. Should you be lighting firecrackers without your parents' help? Let's find out what mischievous Little Pear does and if it's okay or not okay. Crack, crack, crack! Firecrackers were popping, gongs were ringing, and all through the village there were crowds of people coming and going, for the New Year's festival had started. In China, they celebrate the New Year for 2 whole weeks. What are they celebrating? The New Year. And China has its own calendar, so their New Year is at a different time than some other countries. And all during that time, everybody has a holiday. Doesn't go to work or school. This is the time of good things to eat, said Little Pear to Ergu, as they sat on the high doorstep of their gateway between the 2 stone lions. They were happily munching some round, flat cakes and listening to the jolly noise of firecrackers coming from further down the street. I wish New Year's festival would last forever, said Ergu. Nobody has to work now, and tonight they're going to be very beautiful fireworks, and we all have new clothes. Little Pear looked proudly down at his mustard-colored trousers and purple jacket. He had a bright green string tied around his pigtail, and he wore a silver chain with around his neck with a dragon clasp in front. It was a good luck chain. His mother hoped that it would keep him from running away. Ergu, too, had on new clothes. She had on a bright red jacket and bright red trousers, and down her forehead were 3 spots of red paint, which were just meant for trimming and made her look very pretty. What are trousers? That's not a word we use very much in the United States in 2018. Trousers are pants. And it says on her forehead she had 3 red spots of paint that were meant for trimming. Trimming would be like an accessory, like jewelry, basically like wearing earrings or wearing a necklace. Instead, they had paint on their forehead. And it made her look very pretty. Crack, crack, crack! The fireworks were popping steadily farther down the street. Suddenly, Little Pear jumped up. I am going to watch them, he cried. You may finish my cake. Don't go too near the firecrackers, called Ergu as Little Pear ran off. Take care, because you have on your new clothes. Little Pear ran along, and the further he got from home, the nearer to the middle of the village, the more people there were. The streets were crowded with people, all smiling and happy, for everyone was having a holiday. Little Pear pushed his way through the crowd, taking care not to step on any chickens or to tumble over any babies. In the very center of the village was the biggest crowd of all, for there in the middle of the street was a man who was setting off firecrackers, small ones and big ones and middle-sized ones, firecrackers that were separate and went off pop, and firecrackers that were all strung together and went off pop, 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 pop. All the boys of the village were standing around the man, watching him with their mouths open. Stand back, he said to them. Don't come too close. It is dangerous to come too near to the firecrackers. Stand around in a circle, not so close. Little Pear pushed his way through the crowd quite easily. He was so small. And soon he was standing at the edge of the circle, where he could see all the firecrackers very plainly as they went off. He stood and watched excitedly as the man lit firecrackers one by one from a piece of punk. "How I should like to light one," he thought. Just then a big boy spoke to the man. "Let me set off a firecracker," he begged. "I want to set off a big one with a very loud bang." Little Pear looked up at the boy. It was the biggest of the boys, who had chased him off the pond. Here's the caption. Little Pear pushed his way through the crowd. There he is, going around everyone. And if the big boy is the one who pushed him off the pond when he tried to escape. When the man said to the boy, "Yes, you may light just one firecracker," Little Pear thought, "Perhaps he will let me light just one too if I ask him. That will show that I am a big boy too." The big boy struck a match and lighted the firecracker. Then he stepped back quickly. Bang! Do you think the man is going to let Little Pear light a firecracker? What do you predict? Why do you think that he is, or why do you think that he is not? Let's find out. Bang went the firecracker, shooting up into the air. "Aye, aye!" cried everybody. What a beautiful firecracker that was, and what a loud noise it made. "Please," said Little Pear to the man, "may I light a firecracker too?" "You are too small," said the man. "You are too small." "You are too small," said the big boy. And everybody else said, "Oh, yes, he is too small." Then Little Pear said, "Why, no, I am not too small. I can light a small firecracker." The man laughed in a kind way. "All right," he said. "You may light one, but be very quick and be very careful." Little Pear picked out a tiny firecracker. Then he stood up in the middle of the circle and drew in his breath, and he leaned over and lighted it. "Stand back, everyone!" he cried. But in his excitement, Little Pear forgot to stand back himself. Pop went the firecracker, and it flew right up and hit Little Pear. "Oh!" cried Little Pear. And "Oh!" cried everybody else. "Are you hurt? Did it burn you?" "No," said Little Pear, in rather a surprised voice. But he looked down at his clothes, and there, right in the middle of his very best brand new purple jacket, was a hole burnt by the firecracker. There's the firecracker. Hit him right in the jacket. "Oh!" cried Little Pear, more loudly this time. "My beautiful new jacket!" He suddenly remembered that Ergu had told him not to go too near the firecrackers, and he felt so ashamed that he began to cry. The people all tried to comfort him. "Never mind," they said. "That was a fine firecracker you set off. And as for the hole, why, your mother will mend it, so that will not even show." Little Pear felt better then, and he thought if he was a big enough boy to fire off a firecracker, he was too big a boy to cry. He pushed his way through the crowd again in the direction of his house. He was taking care again not to bump into any babies or to step on any chickens, when all of a sudden, bump! Somebody ran into him. It was Ergu. "Oh, Little Pear," she cried, "I've been looking for you. Father has brought us some beautiful new kites for New Year's presents. Come quickly and see." When Ergu and Little Pear reached home, there, sure enough, were the kites. One was like a huge yellow butterfly, and one was like a giant goldfish. Little Pear was so delighted that he forgot all about his new jacket until his mother said, "I smell something burnt." Then he remembered. "It's my new jacket," he said, his voice growing very small. "I lit a firecracker, just one, but it burned a hole in my new jacket." "Oh, Little Pear, what a bad boy you are," cried his mother. "But I'm glad it's only your jacket that is hurt, and not you. Firecrackers are very dangerous, and you must never, never light one again, at least not until you are a very big boy." That night, the family stood in their doorway, watching the fireworks that were to celebrate the New Year's festival. All the sky over the village was bright with the beautiful many-colored lights. Little Pear and his sisters were all dressed in their very best new clothes. But if you looked closely at Little Pear's purple jacket, you could see a tiny hole, neatly darned. What does darned mean? What was his mother going to do to fix the hole in his jacket? Sew it with a needle and thread? Well, that's what darned means, that she sewed it with a needle and thread. As he heard the hissing noise of the sky rockets and watched the sparks falling from the sky, Little Pear decided that when he was a very big boy, he would send off 1,000,000 firecrackers and 2,000,000 skyrockets. But that now, after all, it was nearly as much fun to watch. I hope that you've enjoyed this reading of chapters 3 and 4 of the book Little Pear. And I hope that you'll come back for video 3 to hear more about Little Pear and his mischievous ways as he grows up in China about 100 years ago.